Eric Sydell, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm excited to explore hiring trends with you. And today we're going to be exploring Modern Hire's new 2022 hiring trends report. As we get started, I wanted to share Eric's bio with everybody. Eric Sydell oversees all research and product innovation initiatives at Modern Hire, including the data science-focused labs team. He is passionate about applying machine learning and deep learning in particular to candidate data to more effectively match candidates with career opportunities. Eric is highly motivated to show the power of these new AI-based technologies and guide them to ensure they benefit individuals as well as organizations. He writes extensively on and has spoken around the world on these topics. Eric previously served as Executive Vice President, Innovation at Shaker International, of which he was also a founder. He is also a consultant was a consultant at CBL SHL. He received a PhD in industrial organizational psychology at the University of Akron and a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology at James Madison University. What a wonderful background. I'm excited to have the chance to chat with you. Anything else you would like to share with listeners before we dive on in?
No, I think you covered the high points there for sure.
Well, very good. So as we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about Modern Hire and this new 2022 hiring trends report? I know you put one out last year as well, and we had a chance to chat about that. Give us kind of the 1,000-foot overview of really the impetus behind this report, and then we can start to dive into details.
Great, sure. Yeah, well, thanks for having me on today, and great to chat with everyone. Just in general, Modern Hire is a platform that enables science-based decisions about candidates, helps companies understand who to hire using science, using data, using analytics of various sorts. One of the differentiators I think about Modern Hire is that we have a lot of psychologists, a lot of scientists on our team, approaching probably 50 or so PhD level psychologists and data scientists. So we are very, very focused on understanding data, on understanding candidate data and what it means in the hiring process. So we're constantly studying big data sets and trying to understand what that data tells us and how we can use it to enable more effective, more fair hiring decisions. And we have a number of tools and things, virtual job tryouts, which are sort of day in the life online simulations of jobs, as well as different types of online interview functionality, scheduling capabilities, and things of that nature. And so all of that generates a ton of data, which our psychologists and data scientists like myself it's like a little sandbox for us of fun data to explore and to do research with.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm not an IO psych guy, but I am an organizational sociologist in OB and leadership guy. And I do a lot of research, with big data sets as well. In my own research stream at the university, and it's a lot of fun. I can relate to everything you're just saying. It's fun to get in there. It's fun to explore and to see what's there and to build models and to do all of that. So that's fantastic. And I'm always a big fan of really evidence-based, research-based tools and approaches. It seems like there's plenty of kind of snake oil salesmen out there trying to sell stuff that's really not particularly well researched or well grounded in actual evidence. And I think they give the industry a bad name. So it's great when we have really great data-driven kinds of tools and assessments and such.
Yeah, you do see, I always have thought that, AI is great and there's certainly a ton of benefit to it. But the marketing is like a decade ahead of the science on it. And so there's tremendous advances and really revolutionary capabilities that we see it having in the science world, but somehow the marketing is even more ahead of that, so, and it doesn't need to be because the actual legit, science is there and it's amazing. So it's a fun time to be a researcher and to be able to, access a lot of data because AI is so powerful and it's so much more powerful than traditional tools, especially for, understanding things like unstructured data, which is, anything that's not a test, really, anything that's a verbal response or text information like a resume or whatever else. So it's a fun time.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And as I mentioned on the outset, I had you on last year. We talked about the 2021 through 2020, or the 2020 through 2021 hiring trends. What do you see? What comes out in this new report as the biggest changes you've seen since then?
Yeah, well, in some ways, it sort of feels like Groundhog Day in the trends prognostication world, I think. I think like a year ago, we kind of expected that we'd be through the worst part of the pandemic by now. And, I don't think that's exactly panned out how we all expected. Really the pandemic as an influencer of, the HR world continues. It continues on. And last year, there were two primary influences, I think, on the state of the hiring world. One was the pandemic and all that brings with it. And the other was AI and the continued influence and growth of AI in our space. And those both continue, I think, as the strongest influences this year. So, the trends are sort of an evolution this time of what they were last year. We've learned a lot more about, virtual work and the influence of AI in the past year. And I think that, the biggest aha for us now is that, change and lack of predictability is the norm. And especially in hiring, that's the norm. We've been in a world where there's a lot of scarcity of candidates. That seems to be continuing. But one of the keys for building a successful hiring operation these days is agility, is being able to ramp up or ramp down various parts of the process to keep pace with whatever's going on in your candidate pool. And in a lot of areas right now, that's scarcity, but sometimes it's the opposite and it can change very quickly as well. So, that seems to continue to be a really big and important thing, is being agile in how you're hiring. And, for all the time we spend talking about agility in hiring and about things like the candidate experience and, revolutionizing your process with AI and everything, it's a lot easier said than done. And there's a lot of companies that have not yet really gotten to that point of being able to handle that and make the best of the situation and use modern tools to do so.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And you alluded to, certainly the pandemic is still here. We're in the middle of Omicron. It's still wreaking havoc, and we're just wrestling with all of that, and the machine learning AI revolution, and just all of the disruptive technologies, all of that still influencing the people management and talent space tremendously, for sure. Absolutely agree with all of that, and would encourage listeners to dig into the report to really find out more detail on all of that. One of the things that you mentioned, I'm super curious in diving deeper into, is the shift during the pandemic towards virtual work. And then we got into last fall, and really the conversation moved more towards hybrid work. What do you see in terms of that shift, from face-to-face to virtual, and from virtual perhaps to hybrid? How is that shift impacting hiring long-term? And how is automation playing into that?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So, I think when the pandemic first started and everybody went virtual, it was sort of something that was tolerated, but it wasn't the norm yet, and I think over the past couple of years, we've sort of transcended that to where now virtual work is much more the norm. And, will we continue to be virtual in the future? Probably. I think once you open that door, it's hard to shut it. So it feels like, to me, we're in a period now where, virtual is reality, and there's always going to be a need for people to be on site for certain jobs. And some of the time, virtual is probably not great for I mean, I've been virtual for years, since well before the pandemic, and there's downsides to it. I mean, I'm quite productive. I get a lot of focus time, et cetera. But you miss the FaceTime and the casual conversations, and that stuff is important too. So, ideally, I think we will be more of a hybrid sort of environment in the future. I think that's probably the best mix, and that's what I think that we're seeing with a lot of our clients is virtual is now accepted, but where possible, some sort of hybrid relationship or hybrid work style is best. And how that impacts hiring is interesting. I mean, certainly there's a need for more automated tools, but not just that, more virtual tools, so that you don't have to go into a location to interview. And I mean, there's plenty of tools out there that can do that now. Online interviews are, very predominant these days. We offer interviews at Modern Hire that can be done online. Same time as you can interact with an interviewer, or asynchronously, you can record an interview that the company can see later, and things like that. So there's a lot of flexible technology there that's been very helpful in the pandemic. I think the automation piece that's coming in is very interesting, because a few years ago, no one could process video data or audio data, or really text data that a person's typing open-ended using statistical tools very well. Now I would say like 2 decades ago, we were doing like keyword searches. So like, you upload your resume, and if it has the words results driven in it, then you get a point or something. Great. So, and I think that you still see a lot of that sort of approach today, but deep learning and natural language processing can take that sort of thing a step further to really start to make sense of what's in the resume, not just some random keywords, right? That's not very sophisticated at the end of the day. And what's cool is that same technology can do that on interviews, live interviews as well. Now, what we do at Modern Hire, and over the past year, we've released a technology called automatic interview scoring, where we're using deep learning and natural language processing to make sense of what a person says during an interview and to score it for meaning. And I mean, that's crazy. That was not possible 5 years ago. And it's basically the computer starting to understand what a person is saying. I mean, that's pretty nuts, right? So that's an exciting thing. And I do need to say that when we use that technology, what we do is we transcribe what a person says, and we just use the words they say in the transcription. We're not using the sound of their voice. We're not using the video, what they look like, their facial expression. We're not using any of that information. And the reason is that stuff is filled with bias. With bias. And so what we've found is that just transcribing the words, scoring those against job relevant competencies works great, is tremendous. And it gives us, excellent predictive capability. Those scores are meaningful in the hiring context, and they're almost 4 times lower in measures of bias than human ratings of those same responses would be. So double win, right? That's fantastic. That's the potential of AI to help make hiring more predictive and fairer. And so that's what we're doing. We, there are companies that are doing facial recognition and analysis of a person's the voice, prosody, what they sound like. And there certainly is a ton of data, in those mediums. But in the hiring context, we have made the decision that we don't think it's appropriate. And we've really made the decision that we will only use information from a candidate that they consciously provide to us and that they want to be used in the hiring decision. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I do not want the size of my ears to be used in a decision about whether I should be hired at my next job. That's extraneous as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, the bias issue, it's a big concern. And I've talked to people about AI driven tools in hiring previously on the podcast. And what always comes up, and it's a caveat that needs to be said, and you kind of already alluded to it, is that there's bias there can be bias anywhere, anytime, right? And the same thing with AI. If you are using AI for facial recognition, voice recognition, those sorts of things, there can be bias that comes into it, and depending on how the AI is trained, there can be systemic bias that perpetuates. And so we have to be careful of all of that. And that's one of the reasons why, what you just said a few minutes ago was really important. You actually check measures of bias. You compare the AI scoring versus traditional human scoring, so you can at least monitor that, make sure that there's not some inadvertent, unintentional type of bias that's playing out in how people are being selected.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think the idea of monitoring is so important. It used to be the case that you could develop an assessment for hiring and validate it once, and then have a thick test manual that would stand the test of time, and 5 years later, somebody challenges the assessment, and you just show them the test manual, you're good to go, right? And I don't think that is the best model anymore. The best model is continual analysis of data and monitoring to make sure that there is no bias and that bias doesn't develop over time. Because as the demographics of the applicant pool change, the results of your system can change too. And even if you had a tool that was shown to be bias-free at one point, it doesn't mean it will remain so. And then the other aspect of AI is that, some AI systems are learning over time and evolving as they get more data. And when that happens, you have to be even more careful because, it's as a predictive engine that is designed to predict outcomes. It'll use whatever information it can. And a lot of times that information may end up having some unknown bias in it that wasn't apparent. So, continual monitoring is, I think, increasingly the name of the game. And I hope that we see more and more of that. I know we're certainly working towards it. Monitor everything all the time. And anytime you see a statement like a tool is bias-free or zero bias, that should send up a red flag, because there is no zero bias. And like you alluded to as well, I mean, as humans, we're all biased, and not to say necessarily like we're all racist or actively disparaging of other groups, but unconsciously there's bias. And I think of it as it's turtles all the way down. No matter how deep you go, you uncover different levels of bias, and you can keep uncovering it and ferreting it out. And that's what's so cool about big data and AI, is that it allows us to do that. It allows us to go deeper and to find bias and to get rid of it in ways that, we couldn't do a few years ago.
Yeah. And I think the AI component makes the recruitment hiring process easier. It streamlines it a bit. And this is the same conversation we're having with automation, using AI and machine learning in other areas of the world of work, right? Like displacement of tasks and even jobs, even whole professions over time. Mm-hmm. But what you articulated just reminds me, and it's a point that needs to be made and remade over and over again, so people don't just jump on the anti-AI train too quickly, is that it produces it, while it streamlines certain things, it produces and creates new opportunities for new types of roles, new types of jobs. And so, like you said, there's always going to be a need for data scientists to monitor the AI to ensure over time. And then that monitoring needs to happen on a more continual basis. That means there needs to be highly trained individuals to be able to do that work. And so you're replacing certain more tedious types of work with more skilled work. That's actually a win over time, I think, as long as we can upskill and reskill the labor force so they're ready to take on those types of roles. And so this is just one little example, but multiply across all the different applications of how AI or machine learning can enhance the world of work. And there's going to be other opportunities like that where jobs that didn't even really exist 5 years ago or don't exist now, in 5, 10, 20 years from now, they're going to be huge. They're going to be really important. And so that's just another thing I think it's worth highlighting as we're going through this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that idea of sort of controlling AI. I think of it as harnessing AI a lot. It's like AI is this massive beast. You know, it's been said. Sundar Pichai from Google said, or Alphabet said that, you know, it's the most powerful technology, maybe more so than fire, you know, to human history. It's insanely powerful and capable. And you know, I think, did I say Google? Was he Google or Microsoft? I might have got that wrong. But you know, so that technology is there, and it's sort of, you know, pervasive in our lives, but in a way that isn't apparent to everybody. And so it's sort of seeping in. And the power of it, I think, is not always apparent to normal people. And so we tend not to pay it enough mind. But harnessing it is massively important. You know, I think of AI as like a bucking bronco. It's powerful and wild and, you know, and amazing and awesome. But we need to control it and guide it. Otherwise, it will eventually, you know, start to dehumanize our world more. And already you see things like there's a term called algocratic orchestration, which is, you know, the idea that AI will increasingly govern the work we do and tell us what work to do and help structure that work. And, you know, I don't particularly want to be orchestrated by an algorithm myself, you know, so that type of thing is on the horizon, and we need to be thinking about it and working to control it. I mean, ultimately, AI should be harnessed to improve the human condition, not to usurp it, you know, so.
Yeah, well said. So in our last few minutes, anything else you would like to highlight from the report in terms of hiring trends, or that you would like to highlight in terms of the biggest developments and advantages of AI in hiring moving forward?
You know, I think that there's tons of benefit to AI, as we've talked about. One of the things that I think is important for companies to recognize is that it's not a cure-all, it's not magic, it's just advanced statistical capability. And, you know, AI tools don't solve all the problems of the world. And really, we need to focus less on whether something has AI in it and more just on the effectiveness of the tool and the process. And so, you know, when I talk to companies, I talk about that. You know, think about the overall flow of your hiring process. Think about, you know, at Modern Hire, we talk about the 4 E's, which are sort of our way of highlighting the full range of things that companies should be aware of when they're implementing hiring. Effectiveness, efficiency, engagement, candidate and recruiter engagement, and you know, ethics, fairness. So all those things are super important. And when a solution only gets at 1 or 2 of those E's, it's not good enough, you know, so you've got to think about the full gamut. And I think that increasingly we see companies looking to do that and to understand how AI and automated tools, virtualization, can have a fundamental impact on their hiring rather than just being a Band-Aid in one place or another. So I think that's sort of key for companies in the new you know, pandemic and in the AI age, is re-examining process in a fundamental way and making sure all the tools that they have are aligned to create all 4 of those E's, not just 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, I really like that. Well, Eric, it has been a pleasure. I know at the time I'm going to have to let you go here in a minute, but before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can find out more about you, where they can find the report, what they can do to connect with you and your team if they're interested in exploring this more, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Okay, so yeah, in terms of contacting us, you know, modernhire.com is our website. Feel free to go out there. There's plenty of resources, white papers and things, many of which myself and other members of our psych team have authored. And we love interaction. So, you know, ping us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, wherever. Love to hear from you. We also, I will mention, have a book coming out on March 15th. It'll be released, and it's called Decoding Talent. And it presents a vision really, of the future of how AI can best impact talent management decisions, and sort of a revolutionary big picture view of what it can do for talent management decisions, being published by Fast Company. So we're really excited about that. And now you need a last word, huh?
No pressure.
Should it be lunch? It seems like it's lunchtime.
It's about lunchtime.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds good. Thanks, Eric. It's been a pleasure. I really encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, check out the report in all of its detail. Really great stuff there. I really appreciate you taking the time. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.